A millionaire took in a homeless little girl out of pity, but she was hiding a secret that changed his life. Enjoy the story. The last amber rays of sunset painted the Manhattan skyline as attendees of the annual Woodridge Foundation charity. Auction began filing out. The marble foyer of the Westmore Hotel echoed with the tinkling of crystal glasses and polite laughter. Waiters in pristine white gloves gathered untouched hors d'oeuvres from silver trays as women in designer gowns air-kissed goodbyes and men exchanged business cards with practiced smiles. Outside, beyond the warm glow of the hotel's entrance, a small figure sat motionless in the lengthening shadows of the ornate iron gates. The girl couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her faded blue coat hung from bony shoulders, its frayed edges barely providing warmth against the October chill. Her sneakers, once white perhaps, were now a grimy grey, the sole of the left one peeling away from the fabric. But it was her eyes that stood out, large, dark, and unsettlingly empty, like windows to a house long abandoned. They didn't blink when people passed. They didn't lower when judgmental glances came her way. They simply stared forward, patient and hollow. "Someone should call social services," a woman in an emerald dress muttered to her companion as they stepped into a waiting town car. "Probably ran away from somewhere," her husband replied with a dismissive wave. "They always do." Neither of them looked back. Then came Robert. Robert Adler hadn't planned to attend the fundraiser that evening. At 42, the self-made millionaire was more comfortable with spreadsheets than small talk. His architectural development firm had built half the luxury apartments on the Upper East Side, but he rarely attended their opening galas. Tonight had been an obligation, a favor to an insistent board member. He'd stayed precisely 45 minutes, donated a suitably impressive sum, and was now escaping to the quiet sanctuary of his car when something made him pause. The girl didn't move when Robert approached. She didn't flinch or look up hopefully, like children sometimes did when they spotted a potential source of charity. Her stillness was almost unnerving. "Hello there," Robert said, crouching down to her level. His voice, usually commanding in boardrooms, softened instinctively. "Are you waiting for someone?" She didn't answer. Up close, he could see smudges of dirt across her cheeks and a small cut above her right eyebrow. Her dark hair hung in tangled curtains around a face that seemed too thin, too serious for a child. An event coordinator in a black suit approached cautiously. "She's been there." "Since before the event started, sir." "Won't speak to anyone. We called child services, but they're backed up. Won't be here for hours." Robert studied the girl. Something about her stillness struck a chord within him, a memory of another quiet child from long ago, himself perhaps after his parents' accident, or maybe his sister Elaine before the cancer took her 3 years ago. The thought of Elaine sent a familiar pang through his chest. He'd been too busy to visit her those final weeks, too wrapped up in a development project to answer her calls until it was too late. "I'll take her," he said, the words surprising even himself. The coordinator blinked. "Sir, I don't think that's just until proper arrangements can be made," Robert clarified, already removing his cashmere coat and draping it around the girl's thin shoulders. "I can provide contact information for follow-up." The girl neither resisted nor acknowledged the warm weight of the coat. She simply stood when Robert gently guided her to her feet, her movements mechanical, her eyes still fixed on some invisible point in the distance. In the back of his Bentley, the contrast between them couldn't have been starker. Robert in his tailored charcoal suit, the girl in her tattered clothes, now swimming in his oversized coat. His driver, Marcus, raised a questioning eyebrow in the rearview mirror but knew better than to comment. "I'm Robert," he said as they glided through the city streets. "What's your name?" Silence. "Are you hungry?" "Nothing." The penthouse apartment that welcomed them was a monument to modern minimalism, all clean lines, subdued greys, and strategic lighting that highlighted original artwork and architectural features. The girl's eyes widened slightly. As they entered, the first real reaction he'd seen from her. She took in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the gleaming marble kitchen island, the floating staircase that led to the upper level. Mrs. Peterson, Robert's housekeeper, appeared from the kitchen, her expression shifting from surprise to concern when she spotted the girl. "Martha, could you prepare the guest room, please? And perhaps something to eat?" Robert requested, guiding the girl to a bar stool at the kitchen island. "Of course, Mr. Adler," Mrs. Peterson replied, her curious glance lingering on the girl, before she disappeared upstairs. The girl sat perfectly still on the stool, her feet dangling well above the floor. Robert noticed a small tremor in her hands, the only sign that she might be feeling anything at all. "Oh, you're safe here," he said quietly. "Whatever happened, whatever you're running from, you don't have to talk about it now." For just a moment her dark eyes flickered to his face, then away again. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, the girl slept in crisp, clean sheets in the guest bedroom. Robert instructed Mrs. Peterson to leave the hallway light on and the door slightly ajar. He called his lawyer to explain the situation and arrange for temporary guardianship until proper authorities could be contacted. Then he sat in his home office, staring at the skyline, wondering what had possessed him to bring a strange child into his home. The answer came unbidden, Elaine's voice in his head, gentle but reproachful. "You always did have a soft heart under all that concrete, Robbie. You just forgot how to use it." Morning brought no words from the girl. She ate the breakfast Mrs. Peterson prepared with methodical precision, taking small, careful bites, as if rationing each morsel. Robert arranged to work from home, making calls from his office while the girl sat in the adjacent living room, watching the clouds drift across the skyline. By afternoon, Child Services had been contacted. A caseworker named Diane Morales promised to visit the following day. "It's unusual, Mr. Adler, but not unheard of for children who've experienced trauma to go silent like this. Has she shown any signs of abuse? Any identifying information?" "Nothing," Robert replied, watching as the girl examined his bookshelf, her finger tracing the spines of leather-bound first editions. "She seems relatively healthy, despite her appearance when I found her. No obvious injuries besides a small cut on her forehead. We'll run her description through our database. If she's been reported missing, we should know by tomorrow." That evening, after a dinner during which the girl ate exactly half of everything on her plate, no more, no less, Robert tried again. "If you don't tell me your name, I'll have to give you one," he said, attempting levity. "I'm thinking Gertrude, Mildred, Bertha." The corners of her mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "No? Then how about Grace? You move like you're always calculating your steps." Something sparked in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps. But still, no words. "Grace it is, then, until you tell me otherwise." Days passed. Grace remained silent but watchful. She observed everything. The way Mrs. Peterson organized the pantry, the sequence of numbers Robert punched into his home security system, the pattern of Marcus's arrivals and departures. Her eyes tracked, catalogued, remembered. Robert had expected Child Services to take her immediately. Instead, background checks and paperwork created delays. Diane Morales visited twice, spoke gently to Grace, received no response, and left with a sympathetic smile. "These things take time, Mr. Adler, especially when we don't know who she is or where she came from. Foster placements for older children with potential trauma histories are complicated." 1 week became 2. Robert found himself buying children's clothes, books, a small desk for the guest room that was increasingly becoming Grace's room. He told himself it was temporary, a philanthropic gesture, nothing more. But something shifted each time he returned home to find her waiting, watching, a silent presence that somehow filled the emptiness of his carefully designed home. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Robert had been struggling with a structural problem in his latest development project, a concert hall with acoustics that defied conventional solutions. He'd spread blueprints across his dining table, frustration mounting as each calculation led to the same unsatisfactory conclusion. When his phone rang, he stepped into the kitchen to take the call, leaving the blueprints unattended. The conversation dragged on for 20 minutes. When he returned, the papers were in disarray, and on one blueprint a series of notations had been added in neat, precise handwriting. calculations he didn't recognize, angles adjusted by fractions, a completely different approach. Grace sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, watching him with those unwavering eyes. "Did you do this?" he asked, holding up the blueprint. She nodded once. Robert examined the notations more carefully. "This would change the entire acoustic profile. How did you—" He stopped himself. "Do you understand architectural acoustics engineering?" Another nod. Robert grabbed a notepad and pencil, scribbled a complex equation, one that a child her age shouldn't possibly comprehend, and handed it to her. Grace solved it in seconds. "Who are you?" he whispered. Her lips parted. For a moment he thought she might finally speak. Instead, she rose from the couch, walked to his bookshelf and pulled down a volume on advanced physics. She opened to page 137 and pointed to a paragraph. Robert read it, then looked up in astonishment. "You understand this? All of it?" Grace nodded again. "But how? Where did you learn this?" She hesitated, then spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but clear, like a bell that hadn't been rung in years. "Libraries. They let me stay if I was quiet. I read everything. What would happen tomorrow? Who was this child really, and why had fate placed her in his path?" The questions swirled in Robert's mind as he watched Grace finally drift off to sleep that night. The following morning, Robert made calls. By afternoon, a discreet educational psychologist arrived to administer tests. The results were beyond extraordinary. Grace's IQ couldn't even be properly measured by standard tests. Her mathematical abilities surpassed most university professors. Her memory appeared to be eidetic. Her reasoning skills were, in the psychologist's stunned assessment, unlike anything I've encountered in 30 years of practice. "Mr. Adler," Dr. Winters said quietly, after Grace had been given a book to read in another room, "this child isn't just gifted. She's possibly one of the most intellectually advanced human beings on the planet. The question is, what happened to her? Why was she on the street? A child like this should have been identified by the educational system years ago." Robert's thoughts raced to the same questions. That evening, as Grace sat cross-legged on the couch with a book on theoretical physics, he approached her carefully. "Grace," he said, "I need to understand. Where did you come from? Do you have family? Someone who might be looking for you?" She lowered the book slowly. "Foster care. 6 homes in 3 years." Her words were precise, economical. "The last one, they didn't want a weird kid. Said I made them uncomfortable, so I left. How long were you on your own?" 2 months, 17 days. "And before the foster homes, your parents?" A shadow crossed her face. "Car accident. I was 7. "I'm so sorry," Robert said softly. "Did anyone know about your abilities?" Grace's fingers tightened on the book. "I showed a teacher once. She called me a liar, said I must have cheated." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then the other kids? They didn't like me being different." "So you hid it," Robert realized. "You made yourself invisible." She nodded. "People only notice you when you're useful or when you're trouble. I didn't want to be either." Something twisted in Robert's chest. Recognition, perhaps. Hadn't he done the same? Buried himself in work, in achievement, in the construction of physical monuments to avoid building anything real or lasting in his personal life. The child services appointment loomed the next morning. They would take her, place her back in the system that had failed her so completely. The thought made Robert physically ill. That night he sat in his office making phone calls, to his lawyer, to contacts in education and social services, to a judge who owed him a favor. By dawn, he had a plan. When Diane Morales arrived, this whole. Next morning, Robert was ready. "I'd like to apply for permanent guardianship," he stated before she'd even set down her briefcase. "With the possibility of adoption in the future." The caseworker's eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Adler, while I appreciate the sentiment, these processes take time. There are home studies, background checks, psychological evaluations, all of which I'm prepared to comply with," Robert interrupted. "But Grace stays here in the meantime. I've already filed the necessary paperwork." He handed her a folder containing documents that his lawyer had worked through the night to prepare. Diane reviewed them with a frown. "This is highly irregular." "So is Grace," Robert replied simply. From across the room, Grace watched the exchange, her dark eyes filled with something new. Hope. The months that followed transformed both of them. Robert converted his home office into a learning space, filled with advanced textbooks, computer equipment, and scientific instruments. He brought in specialized tutors who quickly found themselves learning more from Grace than they could teach her. He enrolled her in a progressive private school that agreed to create an individualized curriculum matching her extraordinary abilities. But most importantly, he listened to her. Each evening over dinner, they discussed quantum physics, architectural theory, mathematical paradoxes, and slowly, carefully her past. The 6 foster homes. The nights in libraries and museums where security guards sometimes looked the other way. The careful rationing of resources to survive on the streets. Grace blossomed. Her silences became selective rather than defensive. She began to smile, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. She developed a dry sense of humor that caught Robert off guard and often left him laughing until tears came to his eyes. And Robert changed too. The workaholic who once spent 70 hours a week at the office now left promptly at 5. The man who had attended charity functions out of obligation now engaged passionately with organizations supporting foster children and educational access. The penthouse that had been a showcase for his success became a home, sometimes messy, often noisy with debate or music or scientific experiments gone awry. 8 months after bringing Grace home, Robert received final approval for permanent guardianship. He took her to her favorite restaurant, a small Vietnamese place that made pho just the way she liked it, and slid an envelope across the table. "What's this?" she asked, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "Open it." Inside was the guardianship certificate, along with a key to the front door of the penthouse. "It's official," Robert said. "You have a home for as long as you want it." Grace stared at the key, then at Robert. Her eyes, once so empty, now brimmed with emotion. "Why did you do it?" she asked, the question that had clearly haunted her for months. "Why me?" Robert considered his answer carefully. I think we were both invisible in our own ways. You made yourself small so people wouldn't see you. I built towers of glass and steel so people would only see what I wanted them to see." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Maybe we both needed someone to really look." Grace's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Then I guess we both got lucky." "No," Robert said, "not luck, a second chance." 3 years later, Grace Adler published her first paper in a prestigious scientific journal. At 14, she became the youngest person ever invited to speak at the International Conference on Quantum Computing. When reporters asked about her extraordinary journey, she always gave the same answer. "The most important formula I ever learned wasn't about physics. It was about seeing value in people when they can't see it in themselves." On the 4th anniversary of the night they met, Robert gave Grace a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a delicate silver pendant shaped like a pair of glasses. "To remind us both to really see," he explained. Grace, now a poised teenager with confident eyes and a quick smile, fastened it around her neck. "I never told you," she said, quietly. "But that night outside the hotel, I had decided it would be my last night trying. I was going to give up." Robert's throat tightened. "Give up on what?" "On people. On being seen." She touched the pendant. "You were my last chance too." On Grace's 18th birthday, Robert officially adopted her. The ceremony was small, just the two of them, Mrs. Peterson, Marcus, and a few close friends. Afterward, in the penthouse that had become more science laboratory than showcase over the years, Grace handed Robert an envelope of her own. "What's this?" he asked, echoing her question from years ago. "My decision about college," she replied. Grace had received offers from every prestigious university imaginable. Robert opened it to find not an acceptance letter, but architectural plans, her designs for a network of educational centers for gifted children in the foster care system. "Saitue, I want to build this," she said, her voice steady with conviction. "With you before I go to MIT next fall." Robert studied the plans, recognizing in them both creative brilliance and profound empathy. "It's beautiful," he said simply. "Where? Do we start?" Grace smiled. "We already have, every time someone really sees someone else. Have you or someone you know ever experienced a moment when being truly seen changed everything? Let me know in a brief comment." 1 year later, the first Adler Center for Educational Access opened its doors. The building itself was revolutionary, a collaboration between Robert's architectural expertise and Grace's visionary design. But the philosophy behind it was even more transformative, a place where children like Grace could be both challenged intellectually and nurtured emotionally, where being different was celebrated rather than hidden. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, a reporter asked Robert how it felt to have his company's name on such an unconventional project. "It's not my company's name," he corrected gently. "It's our family name." His eyes found Grace in the crowd, now a poised young woman preparing for her first year at MIT. "And this building isn't my legacy, she is." That evening, as they stood on the balcony of the penthouse watching the sunset paint the city gold, Grace leaned her head against Robert's shoulder. "You know what I've been thinking about lately?" she asked. "Quantum entanglement, the mathematical proof you've been working on, the environmental impact of concrete manufacturing?" She laughed. "No, I've been thinking about invisibility." "How so?" "I spent so much time making myself invisible, hiding what made me different. I thought it was safer that way." She turned to face him. "But the real safety wasn't in being invisible. It was in being seen, really seen, by the right person." Robert nodded, understanding completely. The girl who had once been a silent shadow had become his greatest teacher, showing him what truly mattered beyond wealth and achievement. In saving her, he had saved himself. "To being seen," he said, raising his coffee mug in a toast. Grace clinked her cup against his. "And to second chances." The sun dipped below the horizon, bathing them in the golden light of possibility. Two once lonely souls who had found in each other not just family, but a new way of seeing the world and their place in it. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.